Greetings. This will be the second video of my mini-series on how to set up PA in the most optimal way. In this video, I'll be covering settings and what most of the settings do and how you need to set them up. So I'll go over each of the tabs, each of the sub-tabs, tell you what's important, give you a breakdown on where you have decisions to make, and inform you as best as I can on how you can optimize your PA experience. So, starting off with the graphics. This is the most simple one. There's only one confusing bit, which is resolution scaling. Here, if you go down to lower scaling, this means everything is going to be lower resolution. It's going to look a little bit uglier, but also if you have a bad GPU or if your computer cannot handle the game, then this is what you want to go for. Conversely, if you have a very large display, if you have a well-functioning good computer, then you want to go in the opposite direction, especially if you have a really, really large display. I use subsample of 110%, it's quite useful. Rest of these, pretty self-explanatory, you can leave them as is. Quality, you can do whatever. I use maximum settings, just adjust to whatever your specific screen requirements are and PC requirements. Skybox, if you have like mods for changing the skybox, for example, Lulame has a bunch of really cool ones, then this is where you can enable them from. Moving on, audio. The only thing that I've changed here is setting music to minimum. I sometimes leave it a little bit, but I generally have it disabled. And this is because while the PA music is quite good, it's also quite distracting. It's just very in your face during the game, and that's not optimal whenever you're playing ranked. Speakers, a lot of people can complain that PA audio is buggy or that their headphones don't work. This is where you come and fix it. The reason why there's a lot of bugs is because when you set it to default, it doesn't always update. So you want to set it to whatever you use most frequently and then, deal with that. Camera. There are a couple of important bits here. First, if your middle mouse button is not working, you can manually set it to be one of the other keys. And then you can use an external program to set something else. But yeah, I use middle mouse or extra buttons. Almost all the time I'm using just middle mouse button, which is button number 3. Rest of these, leave them as they are. You can try and practice and with increased changes, but it's better to change the DPI on your mouse than to tangle with these settings. Edge scroll, you don't need this. Just, if you're not playing full screen, if you're not playing full screen, you can do this. If you're playing, for example, multiple displays, you can enable it. But yeah, this is a really important and controversial one. Except for a single Uber, every other good player plays without pole lock. And the reason for this is when you are turning a planet, so what pole lock does is it locks north is always up, south is always down. So you cannot rotate your camera sideways when you're panning around the planet. You're always going to be facing north is up, south is down. The problem with this is it really breaks when you're looking at stuff that's on the actual poles. And I'll show you in a future video probably. I'll show you maybe when I'm doing the 4th video of the series, which is of how everything looks in-game. But long story short, you want to disable this. There's another hotkey that I'll cover briefly when we talk about the keyboards, which allows you to align to poles, which is the N key. But for now, just leave it as off. Trust me and leave it as off. This is for the mod high contrast economy. If the bar is too small, and again, you're going to see this in the 4th video, this is where you can change it from. Moving on, gameplay. Most of this is self-explanatory. Active product Titans. If you sometimes realize that your game does not have Titans, then this is where you come and fix it. Language, whatever you use, GUI and build bar size, leave it as default. The important bits here, show unit icons. Always. Go and set it to always. By default, it's range dependent. Go and set it to always. Whenever you zoom in the game, icons will disappear. If you want to get a cinematic feel, you can just use the POV camera or you can use anything else. But for gameplay purposes, you always want to have your icons available. This just means everything is a lot more readable. You can easily tell what you have, what your opponent has, etc. So my advice, keep this on always. Showing stat bars, you only have 2 options, value dependent or never. Leave it value dependent. If there was an always option, I would click that, but unfortunately it's missing. Next one, show build preview. I think the default is shift, leave it as is. Orbital show, I think it's by default either on never or on shift. Set it to always, and that's just important for how you control orbital units. I'll cover that again more in the fourth video. And finally, this was for show build preview, setting to always. Again, you can set it to shift, you can set it to always, doesn't really matter. It's for buildings, I'd say shift is better if you're experienced, always is better if you're new, because then you're gonna be able to see what's what, everything that's being queued. If there's conflicting stuff, you can tell the party easily, etc. Here, select on both. This is just noob friendly. You can adjust this later on in your gameplay if you don't like it, but I recommend leaving it to selected or all. Orbital show, range dependent. The others, selected and never, just don't. You always want to have your orbital show visible. If something is invading you, this is how you're going to see it. But also when you zoom out and then you can see the entire thing, you can more easily command units to move around. The hot build part, leave it as is. Instant sandbox, leave it as is. I've only changed one thing, which is I've changed the system to be a semi-naval one, so that I can also test naval, but this is a mod, this is not too relevant, you don't care about it. Cool, moving on, server. Set this to whatever is your closest server. For me, it's EU West. The fastest servers are US West and US East, if I recall correctly. So if you're in the US or in the Indo-Pacific, then Australia or US West, but you figure that out. Local server. For me, it's auto, but here are the circumstances in which you want to change this. You want to set it to off if your computer has a very poor CPU. So, poor CPU, you set it to off. This means that the game will never host the lobby on your computer and will always host it on the Uber Entertainment, like the Amazon servers where the game is usually hosted. You set this to on only if you're playing without internet, only if you're playing single player or you're using like servers. But I recommend leaving it on auto. Local multi-threading, again, there's no reason not to have it on. Disabling UPnP, you can do whatever with this. I've left it to off, but depends on your personal settings. The game will tell you if you need UPnP enabled. And this here is for hosting servers, not really important for this video. Now, here's the main one, keyboard. And we're starting off with general. The first thing you want to do is you want to start clearing every single one of these tabs. Everything that you don't need, you want to clear it so that you can free up more buttons on your keyboard for other actually important stuff. The only thing that I've left here is Alt-Enter to, toggle full screen on and off. This is in case you have visual bugs or in case you get stuck on the game, you can close it. Show Hide UI for cinematic screenshots and navigation back and forth, escape. So if you click the main menu, you click escape and this will close the main menu. Communication, leave it as is. Shift plus enter for global chat, enter for local chat. Alerts, I've changed it. The default is G, but G is a key that I'm using for something else. So I've moved it one key further away to H. You're not going to be using this too often, only in team games, so it's fine to throw it like somewhere further away from the central place where your keyboard hand is going to be. Picture-in-picture, I've set it to Q, Shift U, Alt Q, and Alt M. I'm pretty sure these are the defaults, so you can just go with that. Everything chronocam related, wipe it. You just don't need it. Moving on to units. Same procedure. If you don't need it explicitly, remove it. Commanders, I think by default is C, just wipe it. There is a mod that I have installed which selects commanders as idle fabbers. You should also get that mod. I've already listed it in my previous video if I recall correctly. So this will also be covering the commander. Second thing, selecting idle fabbers F. This is probably one of the most important keys you're going to be clicking in your game. You always periodically want to be clicking F so that you can be selecting all your idle fabbers and issuing them orders, making energy, making metal, factories, expansions, yada yada yada. Next bit that's quite important is selecting all factories and selecting all factories on screen. I use Shift F for all factories on screen and Control Shift F for all factories universally. But again, I'd say these are the only two that are important. It will take a while for you to learn these, but keep just this in mind. F for idle fabbers, Shift F for all factories on screen, and Control Shift F, so just a gradation for all factories universally. The rest of these you don't need, because you're not going to be using all, trust me, you don't need them. The next one that's really important is select all land combat units on screen and select all land units universally. I use W and Shift W. So you're gonna see a tendency that whenever I'm using something that's a global version, I add a shift to it, or a control shift for like very, very universal. This is really important because you can just quickly hit W and click hit then whatever your hot build button is for docs, and then you can select all these docs and you can filter through all the units on your screen as opposed to just doing long and tedious motions with your mouse and box selecting. So leave it on W and shift W. This is my advice. Select all air combat units. This is a must-have. Even if you're using manual box selection for air, even if you want to use your air spread around, I strongly recommend to have an all air hotkey. And this is something that every single good player does. Why? Because you always want to keep your air in one place. If it's spread out, that means that the opponent's air that is clumped up in one place can just come and gobble it up. So have this. And for me, it's so important that I've left it on S, which is probably the most worn out key on my entire keyboard. Next important one is select all matching units on screen. I've set it to Z. This is for micromanagement. If you select a spark and you want all the sparks and you forgot what your spark hotkey is, or if you're selecting something that doesn't have a hot build hotkey, Z is just good. Everything else, wipe. Naval is something you micromanage a lot. It's very positional, so you don't want to risk selecting all naval on a screen and fucking up like that. Everything else, again, just clear it. Moving down, unit commands. Move, you don't need anything. Just right click. A for attack is important because there's a difference between regular move and A move. Whenever you click A and then left click somewhere on the map, so left click, right click. So whenever you click A, left click, your army will behave differently. Units will only move until they're in range of something and then they'll shoot. They'll stop and they'll shoot. So this means they'll stay at range when attacking, as opposed to this when they're just gonna attack while moving. So really important to learn how to use A move. Assist and repair you don't need. You just right click and that will automatically happen. Reclaim, however, is important because combat fabricators by default only reclaim if you either A move them, in which case they will first repair and then reclaim, or if you explicitly give them an area reclaim command. So what you do is you go and you click W and then you click whatever your hotkey for combat fabricators is, and then you click R and you drag one large circle, and it will allow you to very quickly reclaim. So 4 keys to get like area reclaim, very, very useful. Or for example, select a couple of bot fabbers and click R and then you can reclaim like enemy docks or something that's attacking you. Patrol, super underutilized command that's very powerful. I have it on tab, so easy access, quick. So you just click unit, hold shift, click tab, click 2 locations, and the unit will be patrolling between these two. Special move, you don't need anything. This is basically for a stress moving up and down from orbital into air layer. Nothing else used in the base game. You can just leave it blank. They will automatically do this anyway when you're picking up units. Unloading and loading. For me, unloading is on space and loading is on D. This allows you to very quickly just click D, area load, and then click space, unload. Similarly, Alt Fire, this is mainly for modded units, but more importantly, it's for your commander. Because your commander, as some players don't know, has an alternative really powerful cannon, which is called the Uber Gun. And that cannon has a lot of splash, it has a lot of damage. So if you click D and you click left click somewhere, that will allow you to fire that cannon and you can clear a lot of units very quickly. So have this on D, it's just easy access. The reason why my ping is not on G is because my stop command is. And your stop command is quite important for things like stopping factories, stopping bombers over individual targets, immediately stopping units from moving, etc. So the important key, keep it close. I've set it on G. Everything else here you can wipe. The only thing I've kept, or rather I've rerouted, is power on, power off. So if I've powered off some of my factories, I select all my factories with Control Shift F, and then I click P, and then all of them will be powered on. And vice versa, if I want everything powered off, then all factories, Control Shift P, all factories are powered off. Moving on, build. Here, wipe everything clean. This is mainly for mods. You don't need any of this because hot build will be doing most of that work for you. Just clear every single one of these fields. You click it and you clear it. Moving on, camera. Wipe these. You don't need any of these. Maybe POV if you want to look at cinematic stuff, but you know, nothing else really matters here. There are two kind of players in terms of camera management. Half of the people use mouse, middle mouse key, the other half use WASD. I use middle mouse key, so the only reason I have this is for emergencies. So if my mouse breaks or something, that I can still pan around and use the keyboard to play the game, you know, somewhat. So you can wipe it if you're using your mouse, or you can set it to WASD. I strongly recommend to use the mouse wheel, because that frees your WASD keys to be actual hotkeys, as opposed to, you know, just camera movement. Moving down, the only thing from all of these that you really care about is tracking. Just leave it on T. It's something you rarely use, but it's useful to have. You select the unit, you click T, and then you switch to picture-in-picture, and that unit will be tracked in picture-in-picture. The camera will just follow it. Here, anchor, leave it as is. Everything else, clear it. Dev mode, clear everything except for, this is really important, so F5 for reloading. This is in case you have visual bugs. And then these are for sandbox, basically. The rest you don't need. So F5 is the only one you really care about. I'd strongly recommend just remove all the rest. The rain editor, not really relevant. You don't really care about this unless you're making maps, in which case you can go and watch a Marshall video. I'll leave a link in the description. And hot build, leave it clear. And finally, in mods, if you followed my mods guide, there is a mod that's called fast delete. You can set it here. If you don't have this mod, you go to units, and there's a delete somewhere, like there's a hotkey that allows you to delete stuff very quickly, to suicide them, I think it's called. I'll find it. It's somewhere in here. You can set this thing to delete, but I use this mod for very quick delete, which means you don't need to confirm it after you've selected it. So yeah, that's why this thing exists. So that was the video. I hope it covers everything you need to know about settings. Next time I'm going to go and I'm going to cover how exactly hot build works, how you can set it up in the most optimal way possible. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this was useful.